Good morning, everyone. This is Ben Weisner, your host and presenter. Thanks for joining me for our webinar using Read Live in a distance learning model. I'm a senior member of the Read Live team, and my job is to educate and support teachers and administrators who are using our program with their students. I'm going to provide you with some useful information and tips about using Read Live when students and teachers may not be able to be together in the same physical location. It was apparent from your questions that there are a variety of experience levels present today, so just a few remarks on what this webinar will focus on. This is not an introduction to the basics of Read Live. We have another webinar I recently recorded and posted on our site that covers that topic. Today we'll be focusing on questions we've received from educators and parents wanting to continue to use the program when students are away from school and cannot be in the personal presence of a teacher, and recommended ways to continue to keep students moving forward within the program. There's a lot to cover, and I may not get to everyone's specific questions, but hopefully you'll all learn at least a few new things this morning. For questions I don't answer today, we'll try to add those to future webinars, point you to resources where you can find answers yourselves, or I'll follow up with you after the webinar ends. In my email to you, you should have received a link to a PDF of my presentation notes, also available as a downloadable file in the meeting panel. This file has clickable links to the information on our website we feel will be most valuable to you and your team as you begin using the program again this school year. Before we get started, I want to let you all know that I speak for Read Naturally when I say that we all have a stake in caring for and supporting the educational needs of your students and their families. We don't want to see your students or you experience any more disruption than is necessary. We hope this webinar will help provide you with the information you need to continue to improve your students' reading skills development with Read Live, even when you're not in the same classroom. Feel free to reach out to us via email, social media, or phone if you need anything at all. Our customer service and technical support staff all continue to provide you with what you need, as we too are having to navigate the challenges of working remotely. Many of you have also asked about a recording. We will be recording the presentation and sending out follow-up emails with links in about 24 hours, so look for that in your inbox. Feel free to share the recording and the resources handout with anyone at your school or district who you think would benefit from this valuable information. Also, at the end of our session, you'll be asked to provide us with feedback about today's webinar. If you could, please respond to the survey so we can continue to improve the webinar experience for all of you in the future. Finally, if you're having technical difficulties, please contact GoToWebinar support. Their phone number is listed at the bottom of the meeting panel. Again, this webinar is using Read Live in a distance learning model. Please note that we'll be offering other webinars throughout the school year. Tomorrow, Thursday, I'll be presenting a webinar on the latest addition to the Read Live family, Word Warmups Live, our phonics intervention program. If you haven't already done so, you'll want to register for that webinar on the Read Naturally website. Even if you can't make it, just by registering, you'll be able to receive links to the recordings, and we'll post the recordings on our website as well. So, back to our webinar for today. Here's my contact information if you need to reach me after the session is over. And here's what we'll be covering today. As you can see, there's a lot to cover. I'll talk first about how Read Live works in a distance learning model in general. I'll talk about how to get started with the program, how to communicate and involve parents, screen sharing and remote control using tools like Zoom, Google Meets, or Microsoft Teams. I'll talk about some adjustments you can make to levels and goals, and also the placement process. I'll talk about how to adjust some story options that may make it easier in a distance learning environment. I'll talk briefly about the student module, but again, I won't be going into an actual demo of the student module, but I'll talk about where teachers or parents need to be involved. Specifically, how to conduct a pass activity in a remote situation. I'll talk about how you can have students record their audio and send it to you and use that when conducting the pass activity. Monitoring student progress with reports, and then some of the resources that we have that you can print out for offline use. So why would one use Read Live in a distance learning environment? Read Live is a web-based program. You can use it on a variety of devices, including MacBooks, PCs, Chromebooks, and iPads. And there is some offline support. So you can print out or download some of the passages. And I'll talk a little bit more about that towards the end of the presentation. We've recently added some new features that support distance learning, and I'll demonstrate those, including the login as feature and being able to print out current story details. Most of the steps, as we'll see, can be completed independently by the student. There are potentially two steps, where teacher or parent involvement is necessary. You can customize the program. We have a variety of school-to-home tools and support. And we are constantly updating our how-to information and providing training in the form of webinars. If you have not already seen this page that we posted on our website, I highly recommend this, and this is in the resources as a link. But this goes through step by step all of the things that I'll be talking about today in highly detailed step-by-step information. So this is a very strong recommend to take a look at this page and the associated articles. And then when I've completed this webinar, we'll also post that in there as well as a recording. So before one gets started using the program, some of you have not used the program before, but here's a quick overview. You want to review the resources and the training that's online. We even have an online course that you can run through, or you can schedule a private webinar with myself or one of my colleagues. You'll set up your account and add your students. You'll place your students. In other words, you'll determine the starting reading level and goal that students will be working towards, and you'll adjust some options. And I'll talk more about those too when I get further into this presentation. And then finally, you'll want to train your students and communicate with parents. So after each section, as you can see in the handout, I have a variety of links that are specific to what I've just spoken about. And all of these links here will assist you in getting students started. So let's talk about school to home. So regardless of your model, in classroom use, hybrid, or complete remote, parents to some degree will need to be involved more or less. We have a variety of parent communication tools, and I'll show you where you can find them in the program. But those include welcome letters, progress letters. You can download, as I said, or print a copy of the story, reports, etc. We also have a very useful set of videos that students typically watch in order to learn how to use the program. These can also be shared with parents in order for them to see their students' experience in the program. So let me quick move over to my web browser, and I'm going to log in as a staff member. And when you're logged in as a teacher or staff member, there's a Read Naturally Live tile. And in that tile, you have a variety of tools built in. So for example, I mentioned earlier, you can print out the passages. This is where you would do that. Clicking on print stories allows you to select the series, the level, and either all stories or one story. And printing out these passages includes the story text, the picture, and the quiz questions. If you're printing out a phonics passage, it will also include a word list. Other parent communication includes if you have included information such as name and email into a student's record, you will be able to then email progress reports directly home to parents from within the program. So for those students that have a parent email address in there, you'll see at the very end of each of the rows, there's a little email icon or logo, and you can type in a personalized message and then send home a progress letter, award for work and level, or award for most recently completed story. These are simply attached to the email and sent out from the program. You can also find additional tools to send home to parents from our Read Live help page. And you can just access the help page from our website. It's just readnaturally.com/read-live-help. And on here, you'll find things like a steps poster in both English and Spanish, a welcome letter in both English and Spanish, the videos that I mentioned for how to train a student. You can just send a link home to parents so that they can watch. So there's a variety of tools both built into the program itself from the Read Naturally page and also on our Read Live help page. So I'm going to return back to my presentation. And this is just a visual reminder of adding a parent's email address into the student's record. And some additional resource links. So in some situations, if the teacher cannot be involved with monitoring a student for whatever reason, or if parents want to be involved, particularly for the PASS activities, the PASS timing, you can set up the program so that parents can be an assistant within Read Live, a Read Live assistant. Sometimes we hear from teachers who are giving parents their own password to log in, which is something that we do not recommend. When you provide a parent a password, it may compromise student privacy. So instead, we've created the ability for you to add a parent as an assistant, and I'll demonstrate that in a moment. Either the primary account administrator, or actually any account administrator created in the program, or school coordinators can create a Read Live assistant. Teachers cannot do that, but if you need help with that, you can certainly give us a call. So assistants can do the timings, cold and PASS activities. They can choose some remedial actions, but they can't view or modify student data. You have the option to create one assistant account or several, one for each parent. There's pros and cons to each, but it may make sense for you to create one assistant with one password, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute, as opposed to creating many. It's much easier in terms of maintaining, or the time it takes to do that. And then of course you want to provide training and resources and discuss expectations with parents. So let's take a look at how one would do that. So I'm going to log out as a teacher and instead log in to the staff member module as if I were an administrator. So when I'm logged in as an administrator, I would click on Staff Member Administration. And then when I go to add a staff member, I have several options. The one I would choose is called Read Live Assistant. So let me show you what that looks like. Oops, sorry about that. Let me show you what that looks like. I'll go back there and show you one that I've already created. So this parent assistant, I just gave them a generic name, parent assistant. I'm using my own email address, so that way the administrator or whoever created the record then has control over password resets, etc. And then again, a generic user ID. And probably if you're doing multiple, if you have an account with multiple schools, you probably want to select all schools as opposed to a specific school. So again, that generic parent assistant or Read Live assistant account can be shared with multiple parents at once. So that's our recommendation. Some resources for you, which I'll show you in a moment, on our website that you can use to show parents how to use the program or support them. But here again, this is what that creating an assistant screen looks like. So how do you support your assistants? Well, when assistants log into the staff module with their own ID, they will see some training information, and I'll demonstrate that in real time in a moment. But we also have other resources, including links that show you how to empower parents to complete the past activities, the videos that I mentioned earlier that students use to learn how to use the program, and a nice template that you can just copy and paste into an email program with information about how parents can work with their child at home. So let's take a look at what happens when I've created an assistant and the assistant tries to log into the staff member module. Remember, we want to protect our students' privacy. So I'm logging in as the assistant. And what they'll see when they log in is a set of videos working through a story, options for students who don't pass, and then information about how to do 1-minute timing, what happens if the student doesn't pass, etc. So just by logging in as an assistant into the staff member module, they have all the training information or all the support information that we've determined is most useful. We are also working on some additional resources, including a video that would be targeted to parents working with their child at home, and we'll post information about that as soon as it's available. And again, here's some additional resources for you. Okay, let's talk a little bit about how you can work with your kids when they are in a separate physical location from you, and possibly parents are not going to be involved. And this is something that I think a lot of you have been doing over the past several months. In any case, using programs like Zoom, Google Meet, or Microsoft Teams. And you can use those kinds of programs to share information, as I'm doing now with my GoToWebinar program. I'm sharing my screen with you. Or you can also control a student's screen with some of these tools. And where it makes sense to perform these activities, primarily within Read Naturally, within Read Live, I'm sorry, are during the placement process, conducting cold timings and past activities, and just generally supporting your students in the use of the program. Now, all of these tools require some planning, some setup, and some training, both for yourself and for your students. I won't get into all of that. That's not really the focus of this webinar, but I do want to obviously point out that some are easier than others. And of course, you'll want to review your district's policies regarding parental consent. Some districts allow you to use Zoom, some don't. Some prefer that you use Google Meet, some don't want you to use, for example, breakout rooms, etc. So you just want to make sure that you're aligned with your district's policies on that. So let's talk about the option of controlling another screen. And again, controlling a screen simply means that if a student is working within Read Naturally Live, and you want to take over the screen to do a timing, you can do that with some of these tools, like Zoom allows you to do that. And that means that you can log in and be in the student's program at the same time as the student to do a pass activity. Now, keep in mind that there are some limitations to this approach. It does require some more interactivity between you and the student. Maybe for some younger students that won't work quite as well. And also you cannot control an iPad screen. So if students are using an iPad, then this option is not possible or available to you. If you can't control a student's screen, I'll talk about another option that I think is useful, and that's simply sharing your screen with the student. But here are the general steps for doing a Read Live session using a tool like Zoom or Google Meet. So first, you'll start a session with one or more students. If you're working with multiple students, you can use features in the programs like breakout rooms to pull students out into a separate meeting within the larger meeting. It's called breakout rooms in Zoom. You can do this with something called concurrent meetings in Google Meet. And you can use something called channels, a feature in Microsoft Teams. If you can't, or you're using a different tools, you can also ask students to mute themselves and others until they're ready to work with the teacher. In any case, you want to agree on a method for students to let you know that they're ready for the timing or that they need assistance. So all of these tools have the ability for chatting. So outside of the actual meeting, outside of the verbal communication, they can always chat or raise a hand, some method to let them know that they're ready for your assistance. If you're going to do remote control, you'll need to request control of the student screen, and the student will need to provide that to you. Or if you're not doing remote control, then you can just log in as the student, and that's where a new feature that we've added to Read Live comes in, and then share your screen with them. And then finally, you'll do the timing or other pass activities or other supports. And then when the timing or pass activities are complete, you'll just relinquish remote control or log out as the student, and the student can continue working in the program. So this is what sharing a screen looks like in Zoom. And again, all of the programs that I mentioned look and work pretty much the same way. You just share your screen. You want to make sure that you have also opted to share computer sound. And then if you're doing remote control, again, with Zoom and Microsoft Teams especially, it's pretty straightforward. You simply say request remote control, and then the student would need to relinquish control. And then you're logged into the program at the same time, or it looks that way anyway. So some tips for using these tools. Remember to take a look at the settings that may be necessary. For Zoom accounts, you need to dig a little bit, and if you're, especially for things like breakout rooms, you may need to turn that on within the program. Before sharing your screen, turn on settings to share computer sound. As I mentioned earlier, if you're working with small groups and your district policy, your school policy allows it, you can use things like breakout rooms. Remember that you can also share files like the PDF of the story or the placement passage. And then it may be useful for you to record the session for review later. Again, all of these things are possible with all of these tools. There's information on our website that talks specifically about those 3 programs that I mentioned earlier, Zoom, Google, and Microsoft Teams, and I encourage you to check those out. So let's talk about placement and adjusting levels and goals. So once you've added a student into the program, a new student, you'll want to place them. And as I mentioned earlier, placement is the process for assigning a Read Naturally Live series, a level, and a goal. There's a variety of ways to do this remotely, and this is not something that parents can do or assistants can do. It must be performed by the teacher. Parents or assistants cannot change goals or levels and cannot do placement. So one way to do it is teacher sharing the placement screen. As I mentioned earlier, you can use Zoom or Google Meet for that. Student can read from the placement screen that you're sharing, or you can send them a paper copy of the placement passage, and I'll show you where you can find that in a moment. The student can share, or you can take control over the student's screen. If they have not been placed yet, they'll go right away to the placements application within Read Naturally Live, and I'll show you how that works. And if you already know a student's level and goal, or if you just want to perform placement over the phone, again, you can enter settings manually in the staff module. So let me show you those options. So let's say I'm the teacher and I'm ready to place a student. I'm going to log in to the staff module. I'm going to go to the Read Naturally Live screen or tile. And let's say a student, for example, this student, Bernice, does not yet have a series level or goal. I'm going to click on place. And now I'm going to share my screen with Bernice. So you don't want to share your screen when you're still looking at a list of students. You want to get to this screen first and then start your share session. And then simply go through the placement process, and I'll show you what that looks like in a moment. When you get to this screen, note at the bottom right, there is a print placement stories button. So if you do want to grab PDF copies of the placement passages, this is where you will find that. And again, you can just download these or print them out. So that's one way to do placement. You do that through the staff member module and just get to this screen and share your screen. Another way to do that is you can use your login as button. So login as I mentioned earlier, is a new feature. It allows you to log in as if you were the student. If the student is currently logged into the program, it will log them out automatically. So you don't have to ask them to log out themselves. So in the case of Bernice, I'll click login as.
Before you can begin working, your teacher must assign you a series, level, and goal. Please tell your teacher.
So now I'm sharing my screen with Bernice, and then I have to enter in my teacher credentials. And I come to that same screen that I saw earlier. So either way would work. You don't have that print placement passages from this screen, however. So back to my presentation. Placement basics. You select a starting level to do the placement test. Student reads from the screen or from a passage or from a PDF or paper passage. Reads for 1 minute. After 1 minute is over, the teacher enters in the number of words the student missed. The program evaluates the score and compares it to the recommended placement range. And if it fits within the range, a goal is assigned, as well as a general level, and then the teacher determines which of our 3 different series, depending on where the student placed, would be most appropriate for the student. Again, we have a video that shows you how to do the placement and then more information on our website. So you also have the ability to differentiate the program for each individual student needs. We have an area in the program called Story Options, and you can make changes to that either to a group of students or to individual students. So considering you all, teachers, may be stretched and parents might not be up to the task, it is possible for you to change the cold timing option to allow the student to perform that independently without a teacher or parent being involved. And I'll show you where to do that or how you can do that. We think this is appropriate and okay. If your student needs a lot more supervision, you obviously may need to be in charge of the cold timing, but for many kids, this is an option. Remember that the cold timing is not an assessment. It's the past activities that are the actual assessment. You can access story options from either the staff module or the student module. And there are other things that you can change, including adjusting the amount of time for prediction and retell or removing them entirely. This is what that screen looks like. So as you can see, there's check marks next to some of these, next to most of the steps, and then different options that you can change or adjust. So let's take a look at how you would do that. When you log into the program as a teacher, oops. There we go. You'll go to the Read Naturally Live page, and you'll want to make sure to select or click on the name of the student or students for whom you want to change story options. And under cold timing, the default is teacher required, but you can change that to student independent. So some of the advantages of doing that include teachers being able to manage more students in the allotted time that they have. Students would be able to get through more stories and be in the act of reading more because they don't have to wait for the teacher for the cold timing. And then for a lot of students, they have a heightened sense of independence and ownership if they're solely responsible for the cold timing. Obviously, the cold timing score is not totally accurate, but it's okay because it's not an assessment, as I said earlier. They may miss words and not know they missed them, but they'll learn the correct way to say them in the very next step. So they won't practice them over time incorrectly. So definitely an option for you to choose. Back to my presentation. Again, there's a video on our website that shows you how to do that, and more information about customizing the program for individual student needs. Okay, using the student module. So again, a reminder, and I've been demonstrating this, how do students log in when they're at home? The same way that they log in when they're in the classroom. Depending on their device, Chromebook, iPad, or computer, they'll go to readlive.readnaturally.com on the iPad. You'll need to download a separate iPad app that automatically takes them to that location. They'll click on the student button. They'll enter in 3 items. The account ID, that's the 8-digit number that corresponds to your school or classroom's account. Typically begins with several zeros. Once they've entered that the first time they've logged in, they shouldn't have to enter it repeatedly because the program or the web browser kind of keeps it cached. And then their user ID and password. Remember that students must log out when done, as opposed to just shutting down the program, shutting down the Chromebook, I'm sorry, shutting down the browser. Sometimes you run into issues where students are locked out of the program until a teacher resets their session. So just make sure to log out when done. And when they're logging out, sessions are saved so their location is saved. So for example, if they're in the middle of the read along and they log out, the next time they log back in, they go right back to the read along. So this is the steps poster that I've mentioned earlier. We have this on our site in both English and Spanish. And I just want to review very quickly. I'm not going to do a demonstration. I have a webinar I mentioned earlier, Read Live Basics, that has a full demo of the program on our website. But I just want to point out on this set of steps, there are 2 steps, and those are listed as with a red asterisk. That are the 2 that are potentially requiring an assistant or a teacher to move the student along. The cold timing, I say potentially because remember the cold timing, you can make student independent. And really it's only the past activities where someone needs to work with the student. Obviously the student may need support in other areas, but as a hard requirement, it's the past activities. All of these other steps, really the student can be performing independently. So again, some resources on our website, the Student's Guide to Read Naturally Live, a lesson plan for teachers, which is a great overview of how to show your students how to move through the steps of the program. And then our fidelity checklist. It's 2 pages. It's a nice high-level overview that's useful for teachers, and you could certainly share that with parents as well. All right, so I mentioned the past activities several times, so let's run through that and what that entails. The past activities happen at the end of a lesson, at the end of the story. This is where you perform the final hot timing. And that entails starting the timing, counting missed words, and assessing expression. You're going to review any open-ended quiz questions. You're going to review what the student typed for retell. If you want to make things easier or retell is not as critical to you as actual the reading portion of the program, remember that you can turn that step off if you wish. You'll do word list timings in the phonics series. You'll review the work with the student, how they performed. There's a brief report that you can use for that purpose. And then if the student missed any of the requirements, you can have them return to those steps and complete them to your satisfaction. So let's see what that looks like. So when a student gets to the point where they need someone to conduct past activities, they'll see either the story itself, there'll be a practice area where they can practice reading the passage, and they'll move back and forth between the practice screen that contains the story and Wordtastic. When you are available, so the student will notify the adult who is in charge that they're ready to be to go through the hot timing, and you'll click on Conduct Past Activities. You'll listen to the student read, enter in the number of words missed, and enter in an expression score. You and they will see their hot timing scores, their past timing compared to their cold timing. You'll review any open-ended questions. You'll review the retell or the word list if they're in the phonics series. And then this is the review work screen that you can use as a discussion point for the student. And again, if they had any requirements that they need to complete, you can send them back to complete those. So having said all of that, how do you do that in the world that we find ourselves in now. So you can either assign a parent to perform those past activities or to share that responsibility. So sometimes you would do that, sometimes they would do that with their assistant password. Student could complete most of the steps at home or outside of the classroom, and then the past activities inside of the classroom if you're working in a hybrid model. Teacher can use the remote control option in Zoom or Microsoft Teams to conduct past activities. Or again, you can use that login as feature that I showed you earlier for that purpose. And then finally, a new option that we've written about on our website is student can record audio of themselves reading the passage and sharing that with their teacher. So let me show you what this looks like. So I have a student named Jeff who is ready to pass. How do I know that? Well, he's let me know, or I can click on this current story details button, which is something that we've recently added as well. And that will generate a report that shows you all of the steps that the student has completed up to this point. So this shows me, obviously, he hasn't been passed yet, and it shows me that he's completed the retell. So once he's completed the retell or the word list practice, you know that he is probably ready to be listened to. And what I'm going to do again is log in as Jeff.
Now you're ready to pass. Read the story and play Wordtastic until your teacher comes to pass you on this story.
And once I log in,
start timing and begin reading.
Once I log in as Jeff, if Jeff is already logged in, it will log him out. And now I will begin my share screen session with him. So he's looking at the same screen that I'm looking at. And since I am controlling the screen, I will click Conduct Past Activities. And then I will begin the timing and control the session from here on out. So I won't do that just because I want to preserve this record for now. So I would click on Start Timing, listen to him read, and run through those past activities that I showed you earlier. Once that's complete, I'll simply log out, and then Jeff can log in as himself and continue working or selecting a different story. So that's how login as works. I'll talk a little bit more about the screen recording in a little bit. Let me get back to our presentation. And hopefully that helps you understand that process a little bit better. It's fairly straightforward. And again, more information, including how to use that login as feature on our website. So let's talk about recording student audio. A number of you have let us know that you're using tools like Seesaw or Screencastify to record student audio for listening later. And that's certainly an option for you to use. And the way that would work is student launches a recording app, whatever that is, while Read Naturally Live is visible on their screen. They can either record their reading from the Pass More Practice screen, in other words, the screen that appears before conducting past activities has been initiated, or from a printed or emailed story as PDF. So this is one benefit for doing this is, and something that we can certainly encourage, is for student to read the passage multiple times within the recording and listen to themselves reading and reflect on their performance, trying to improve it before sharing it with the teacher for scoring and assessment. They can share their recording via email, as an attachment within a Google Classroom, or there's a variety of other tools, as I mentioned, Seesaw, Screencastify, etc. Teacher will receive the recording, log in as the student, that's where that login as button comes in again, and then complete the past activities, even if the student is not there for a certain portion of it. So the tools I mentioned earlier, Seesaw, Screencastify, I'm going to demonstrate very quickly a program that's free. It's simple and easy to use. It's called Vocaroo. Lots of schools are using that as well. It's just a website. I'll show you what that looks like. And then finally, we also are working on the ability to incorporate that feature into Read Live. So at some point, we'll notify you that you are able to allow students to record themselves and then send or notify you that the recording is available for you to evaluate. But let's take a look at this program called Vocaroo. If you already have another program, you can tune out to this, but this is a nice little program. You just go to vocaroo.com. Again, the student can have a printed copy or have the passage available on a different tab. Click on the record button, just speak or read the passage. When they're done, they'll click on that button again, click on save and share. And then they can either email the link to their recording, which is stored out on the Vocaroo website, or download it as an MP3 file, and then again attach it to Google Classroom or some other tool that you're using to share files. Very simple. And when they're done, they just close it out and then that recording goes away. So check it out. There's some information up there about privacy and how they work with schools on their website. Resources available on our website that may be useful to you. Okay, progress monitoring. How do we monitor student performance remotely? Well, again, it's great to be in the classroom to be able to have ongoing dialogue, but at this point, we're having those dialogues via Zoom or Google Meet meetings, and you're also going to have the same access as you had before to the reports that are built into the program. And you're going to use the data and the reports to create ongoing challenge for your kids. Remember that they should be challenged but not frustrated by the level or of text difficulty. You can always adjust levels and goals, remember, and you can use the reports to make that determination. Students should be able to reach their goal, not easily, but with effort. There are two distinct phases that we recommend you take a look at the reports. I shouldn't say either. At both of these times, you're going to check students' initial placement after they've completed several stories to determine whether they've been placed appropriately. And again, you can always adjust levels and goals. And then ongoing, you're going to look at the reports to ensure that they can keep moving forward and again, be challenged but not overly frustrated. So let me show you where you can find that information. So again, I'm logged in as the teacher. Whenever I'm ready to look at data, I'll click on reports. And there's a variety of reports that you can generate. The one that we use most frequently for evaluating students is called Students at a Glance. But there's other reports including fluency and comprehension reports displayed in graphical format, student level reports, student detail reports, etc. Out on our Read Naturally Live page on the website, there's a tab for sample reports, and you can see what these reports look like if you want to get a feel for the kind of information that you can save and generate for your kids. So one, as I mentioned earlier, is the Students at a Glance report. I apologize, this is taking a little bit long, so I'm just going to move over here. The graphs, wordless graph, if they're in a phonics level. The story details report is a great one for you to share with parents, by the way. And then we added a new report recently that allows you to review placement results in report format. Okay, rather than wait for that, I'll just direct you to that page when you want to view those samples. And finally, if you want us to take a look at your reports, you can email my colleague, Claire Hayes, and she can take a look and determine whether any adjustments need to be made. So we're happy to do that for you. There's no charge for that. Just reach out to Claire when you are ready. Obviously, it may be a little bit too early at the beginning of the school year for that purpose, but feel free to reach out to her. Again, there's a nice video on our website about how to access the reports and more information about changing levels and goals. And actually, let me show you where you do that as long as I'm here. Let's see if that's ready. There we go, finally. This is what the Students at a Glance report looks like. You can generate a report for multiple students at a time. You generate the report based on a reporting period, and it shows you averages for things like cold and hot timing scores, quiz scores, etc. But in the Read Naturally Live program, if you go to the Read Naturally Live screen, changing levels and goals can be found under the assignment column. You just click on Edit, and this is where you make that change. You can change the series, the level, or the goal. Okay. So I mentioned that some aspects of the program can be used offline. So you can share PDF stories, PDF versions of the passages via Google Classroom or Zoom, email them to parents, etc. So some accommodations can be made. You can mail those passages home as packets. The crossword puzzles that I mentioned here on the screen are additional waiting time activities, again, reinforcing vocabulary. They're available. There's a link to them in our Read Live help page. And you can also search at readnaturally.com for glossary, or you can click on this link and that will bring you to PDF copies of the vocabulary in each of the passages. So visit our Read Live help page and you can use these links to go directly to those resources as well. I do want to mention, if you've logged in recently into the program, you'll notice a new tile or a new button within the student module or the staff module, and it's for our new program called Word Warmups Live. This is a new program built into Read Live. It just comes with the program now, and it provides differentiated support for students who are needing additional phonics instruction. It does not replace the phonics series. It's another way for you to provide that, that direct instruction to students. As I mentioned, I'm doing a webinar on that tomorrow, and we have starting to post additional resources, including a couple of videos that show you how a student would work through a couple of the exercises or lessons. And Word Warmups Live is going to focus on single syllable words and provide instruction in the most common phonics patterns. And again, I'll demonstrate that for you tomorrow. We are also working on some great new enhancements to Read Live that should be coming relatively soon, including even easier screen sharing. So I showed you that login as feature. We're working on making things even more powerful in that regard. As I mentioned, we'll also be including the ability for students to record themselves for later review by the teacher, and more robust reporting for you so that you can track student progress within the program. I can't tell you when those will be available, but we are currently working on those capabilities. A reminder about our Read Live help page where you can find videos, knowledge-based articles, recorded webinars, a free online training course, which I highly recommend, and job aids. Here are links to recorded webinars that we did recently, as well as registering for the webinar tomorrow. And I know I've gone through a lot of information relatively quickly. If you have questions that I have not answered, please reach out to me, let me know, and I'd be happy to work with you or have one of my colleagues assist you as well. I want to thank you for attending the webinar. Another reminder that we'll be sending out follow-up emails with links to the recording in about 24 hours, so please look for that in your inbox. Feel free to share the recording with anyone at your school or district. And if you could, please do respond to the survey that will appear on your screen as you exit the webinar, so we can continue to improve this educational experience for all of you in the future. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of the day and a productive start to the new school year.